guys, it's Kesara, and today I'm gonna be doing my October TBR. So last October, I discovered the horror genre for the first time and how much I loved the horror genre, because before that, I really didn't care for like scary things. But after reading books like Bird Box, Pet Sematary, The Shining, At the Mountains of Madness, like I finally realized what I love about the horror genre and how the tension and the creepiness of the story is really what makes the genre for me. So I spent the entire year creating this TBR for this month of all of the books that I wanted to read in the month of October. And then I got to the beginning of this month and I was just like, I kind of don't want to read half of those books. I know, like, I don't know why. I think it's partially because last month was my Sci-Fi September, in which I just read a ton of like really fast-paced, action-packed sci-fi novels, which were great. They were really great. But I'm just really in the mood right now for like slow burn, more character-driven, and very atmospheric novels. That's really what I want. Some just beautiful atmospheric novels, which, I mean, if they're a bit creepy too, then I would absolutely love that as well. So I'm not going completely off of the horror idea, but I'm looking for more of a mood rather than just plain horror. Like, I'm really not in the mood right now for Stephen King. I think he's a great author. I've read plenty of books by him that I absolutely love, but I'm not in the mood for his type of writing right now. I want something that's not as dark. Well, I mean, it could still be dark, but I wanted the writing to be a little bit more subtle. I want it to be a little bit more of a slow burn. I don't know. I just want it to be a little bit more atmospheric than that. So like, for example, I had originally planned to finish It by Stephen King this month because I read about half of it so far, and also to read Salem's Lot. But neither of those are gonna make it onto my final TBR just because I'm not in the mood for something that like grounded, if that makes sense. A little bit more, I don't know, artsy maybe is the way to put that. I don't know. That's really weird, but that's just what I'm in the mood for. This is gonna be a weird TBR because I'm going to go more for a feeling rather than a genre. So like, I'm gonna have some of the more like fantasy that are like atmospheric fantasy with like beautiful writing, and then maybe a little bit of creepiness in it, all the way to like horror that I feel like will be like more of the creepy horror rather than like the terrifying horror, if that makes sense. I don't know. Maybe this TBR will not work that well at all. I feel like this is like kind of a hard TBR to do because I feel like it's a hard thing for authors to do the right way, and it could fall very flat when authors try to do this. So I'm a little nervous about this because I feel like this month is the month where like I'm not sure about any of the books that I'm reading, because this kind of feeling is not the type of thing most people like to read, if that makes sense. So a lot of the books that I'm putting on this TBR are books that are very polarizing books that people either really love or really don't like. They're not plot driven, if that makes sense. Most of the books I'm putting on this TBR are more character driven, are more slow burn, and they're more about atmosphere than they are about plot. And that's just what I'm in the mood for right now. So we'll see if this works. We'll see if October is a success for me or if it's gonna be a complete bust. It really is just the mood that I'm in right now. Like, I've tried this past week to read some of the books on my September TBR that are more like action driven, and I just can't read them. So I'm hoping that these more slow burn books will work better for me in October. Okay, so for my classic this month, I decided to go with Jamaica Inn by Daphne du Maurier. So Daphne du Maurier is an author that I've read like 2 books by so far. I've read Rebecca and the Birds. I'm gonna be honest, I liked Rebecca quite a bit more than the Birds, which is a romantic suspense novel as opposed to the Birds, which is just like pure horror. I've been wanting to pick up more books by her. I've heard that Jamaica Inn is like her second most popular book after Rebecca, so I decided that this would be the next book by her that I read. The reason why I decided to pick her for this month is because I'm going for that more atmospheric sort of horror, sort of like creepy and beautiful sort of writing. And in Rebecca, I felt like du Maurier did such a good job of just creating that atmosphere of this like gothic sort of manner, and I feel like she could do the same thing with this one. And it had just such great suspense and good tension while at the same time being really creepy, and it had a little bit of romance in there, and I just feel like all of that put together just made such a great reading experience, and I kind of want to recreate that. So I hope that Jamaica Inn will give me kind of the same feelings as that. I don't know very much about this other than it's about an inn, which also gives me like One by One vibes by Ruth Ware, which is set in a chalet in the French Alps. This is kind of like the opposite because it's set like on a beach, but like still recently read One by One. I kind of want more of those sort of like creepy like thrillers. So I feel like this is just the perfect time for me to read this book. So I'm really excited to finally continue on with reading more works by Daphne Daphne du Maurier. So for my reread this month, I'm gonna be rereading The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang. This is in anticipation of The Burning God, which is coming out in November. So I'm finishing my reread of the series. Earlier this year, I reread The Poppy War, so it's definitely time to reread The Dragon Republic. And I have to say, I absolutely love The Poppy War, mind you. Even upon reread, I absolutely love The Poppy War. But the first time I read The Dragon Republic, my mind was just like, oh my gosh, this book is so amazing. It's twice the book The Poppy War was. So I'm just really, really excited for this. For those of you who don't know, this is a Asian-inspired grimdark fantasy series that is following a character named Rin. It's almost kind of like a retelling of Chinese history, which is really, really interesting. I absolutely love all of the world building that has gone into this book. I absolutely love the characters, and you guys have no idea how excited I am to see the finale of this series, and I'm definitely also really excited to reread this book. I just remember the first time I read this book, it completely blew me away, so I'm super excited to get back to it. So there are several new releases that I really want to try and get to in the month of October. One that I know I'll absolutely be getting to, even though it comes out on October 27th. Like, I'm fairly certain, even though it comes out that late in the month, it will still be on my October wrap up, and that's Hollowpox by Jessica Townsend. I am so excited for this book. It is the third book in the Nevermore series. I absolutely love the Nevermore series. It is very much a whimsical middle grade fantasy series that is just absolutely fantastic. It's following the character of Morgan Crow, who is a cursed child, which means she's supposed to die on her 11th birthday, but instead she's whisked away by Jupiter North to join the Wondrous Society. In the first book, there's like this competition to see who can get into the Wondrous Society, which I absolutely love. The first book, by the way, absolutely loved it. I immediately fell in love with the story and these characters and the world building. The world building is so whimsical and great that I absolutely love. And then I read the second book, and oh my gosh, the second book, Wondersmith, is even better than the first book. Like 100 times better than the first book, which surprised me so much because I didn't expect that any book could be that much better than the first book. But I love the first book, absolutely love the second book, so I'm hoping that I'll love the third book as much as, if not more than, the first two books. I just have a feeling the third book is going to be amazing. I really hope it is. It might not be, but I'm really hoping that it's going to be amazing, and I cannot wait to get to it. And also, since it's the middle grade book, I'm fairly certain I could read this book in like under a day. I'm pretty sure I read both the first and second books in like less than 24 hours also. And honestly, I have been waiting for this third book to come out for the longest while, and I'm just so excited to finally get it. So the other new release that I want to try and get to in the month of October is The Once and Future Witches by Alex E. Harrow. So this is a historical fantasy novel. It's set, I think, in the 1800s, and it's about witches. So it's like paranormal fantasy, but like, I feel like the way Alex E. Harrow writes, based off of her previous novel, The 10,000 Doors of January, which I read and absolutely loved, she writes really atmospheric, almost like magical realism novels, but just like a little past that magical realism level, which I feel like is just like absolutely perfect for what I'm trying to do in the month of October. I don't know if this novel is gonna have any of like the creepiness to it that I'm hoping to get out of it, just because I haven't seen that sort of writing from Harrow before, but it is about witches and it's coming out in October, so maybe? I don't know, but I'm really excited for this. Like I said, her debut novel was fantastic. I absolutely loved it. I love her writing, and I'm really excited to see what she does with this type of novel as well. So the next book that I'm definitely planning to get to in the month of October is The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. I've heard so many great things about this book. Everyone who's read this book that I've like seen talk about it just like absolutely rave about it. A few things that really caught my attention that I've heard about this book is that it gives you kind of like Frederick Bachman-ish vibes. It's kind of like a middle grade fantasy, but like written for adults, which is just absolutely fantastic. I love a good middle grade fantasy. So I'm thinking this is like whimsical fantasy sort of oriented, but like with like peculiar characters and very character driven story with like internal turmoil sort of things going on, which just makes me think that I would love it. That's just complete conjecture on my part, but I just feel like this is one of those like feel good fantasy books that I'm going to absolutely love, and I'm hoping that it has a great atmosphere also. I feel like people wouldn't be raving about this book as much as they do if it didn't have a great atmosphere. So I feel like this one is just gonna cut some of that tension that I'm gonna get from most of the rest of the TBR that I have here, because most of them are gonna be closer to like horror books. So I'm really excited to have some more whimsical fantasy. Definitely excited to finally get to this one, because I've had this one sitting on my shelf for like a little over a month now, and it's just been staring me in the face, and I'm really excited to get to it. So this next book I have put on my TBR several times in the past and haven't gotten to it, but I just feel like the type of book it is, October will be the perfect time to read it, and that's Middle Game by Shauna McGuire. So I've heard this is just very much a slow burn, character driven story. Obviously this is an adult fantasy, but I'm hoping that it's atmospheric. I don't know. I can't tell with Shauna McGuire with her writing, because she writes very widely in a lot of different genres, and I feel very differently about her books. They're always really hit or miss for me, but I feel like if I could potentially really love one of her books, I think this would be the one that I would really love. So I'm hoping that I'm gonna end up liking this. I also heard that there is a really great sibling relationship in this, which I love good sibling relationships, and that just makes me even more excited for this. So I'm definitely excited to finally get to this book. So the next book that I want to talk about is Imaginary Friend by Stephen Chbosky. So this book I'm a little hesitant on as well, just because I've heard really great things as well as not so great things about this book. I don't know very much about it, but from like the description of the book, like on Goodreads, definitely seems like it has like that creepy sort of slow burn atmosphere that I'm looking for in the month of October. So I'm definitely excited to try this. I personally really love The Perks of Being a Wallflower and how character driven that book was. So I'm hoping that Imaginary Friend is also super character driven. I've heard really good things about it. Like some people have absolutely raved about this book and really, really loved it. And other people have just been really mad about it. So I don't know. I have no idea whether I'm gonna like this book or not, but I'm definitely excited to find out. And the next book that I'm planning to pick up is one that I put on my TBR before, but I didn't get around to it, which made me really sad because I did really want to get around to it. But it is a horror novel, so I think it's finally time for me to put it on my TBR again. And that's Mexican Gothic by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. So this is obviously a horror novel that is set, I believe, in Mexico based off of the title. I haven't actually like researched that. And I've heard that it's heavily inspired by The Yellow Wallpaper, which I read last month and absolutely loved. It was so fantastic. It had such a really great backstory to it, and the execution of it was just perfect. So I'm really excited for this. I'm hoping that I'm gonna end up absolutely loving this. I don't know if I will though, because Sylvia Moreno Garcia's previous novel I didn't love because of the writing style, but it was also fantasy, and I am very picky about my fantasy, like really, really picky about my fantasy. And I'm not as picky about my horror, so I feel like I could potentially really love this, even if I don't love the writing that much. I've also heard some really great things about this, so I'm hoping that I'm gonna end up loving it as much as everyone else seems to. And because I can't go a single month without reading at least one book by Octavia E. Butler, I'm going to be picking up Fledgling in the month of October, which is of course by Octavia E. Butler. So this book is the book that she published last. It was published about 7 years after her previous book. She took like a 7-year hiatus between books, and this one is about an amnesiac girl who is also somehow a 53-year-old vampire. I've kind of been somewhat intrigued in vampire novels again since Midnight Sun came out. I know, what's wrong with me? But I have been, and when I found out that Octavia E. Butler wrote a vampire novel, I was just like, yes, please. Like, I want to read everything that she's written. She has just some of the most beautiful, dark writing that I've ever read, and I'm excited for this. I'm excited to see what this is about. I'm excited to see how she does with horror, because she does a really good job with sci-fi, like dark sci-fi, so I feel like she would be like the queen of horror also. So I'm really excited for this, and hopefully I can get to this very soon. And perhaps the book that I am the most nervous about, we have House of Leaves by Mark Z. Danielinsky. So this book is one that I feel like it's either brilliant and it's gonna be one of my favorite books of all time, or it's gonna be complete rubbish and I'm gonna hate it. I haven't decided which yet. From what I hear about this book, it sounds amazing. It's like a postmodern like horror novel. It's about like this documentary about this house in which the house is bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. So there's like these supernatural elements to it. And it's about this guy who is commenting on the documentary, but it's also about this other guy who found the book that was written by the guy who was commenting on the documentary, and he also comments on the other guy's book, and it's just like a book within a book within a book. That's interesting, but it's also told in like a weird format because like it has like tons of footnotes and stuff, and like it's in color, and there's just like a bunch of different aspects to that. There is even some speculation in this fictional world as to whether the documentary actually exists. And I don't know, it's one of those books where I feel like you have to pay very close attention to things, and there are gonna be like multiple unreliable narrators, and it's supposedly one of the scariest books of all time. Or it may also be a love story? I don't know. I'm nervous for this book. I'm really nervous for it, but I'm also really excited because I feel like I could potentially really love it as well. It's definitely one of those books you gotta take a little bit of a leap of faith to even start reading it. But I figured since there's like a 30-day return policy, I should try and get to it in the next 30 days or so, and hopefully I'll end up loving it. So now it's time for my fantasy book series challenge, which is always my favorite part of this video. So for those of you who don't know, my fantasy book series challenge, I got a bunch of fantasy series in there that I've been meaning to read for the longest while, and every month I pick out 2 that I'm going to read that month, or at least I'm going to try and get to that month. So I'm going to be picking out 2 of them from this mug. This one. So this is the first one, which is The Rhyria Chronicles by Michael J. Sullivan. So this is a series that's actually been recommended to me many times. I believe the first book in this series is Theft of Swords, obviously by Michael J. Sullivan. Actually, I think that's like the first 2 books that are in like one bind up of it. I do have the audiobooks for these, so I'll definitely be listening to the audiobooks for these. And I don't know, I'm excited for it. I've heard it has some really good banter between like the 2 main characters, and they have like a really good friendship, which I'm always down for a really good friendship. So I'm definitely excited for this one. And then I get to pick one more. So we have The Band by Nicholas Ames, and the first book in that series is The Kings of the Wild. I've heard really great things about this one as well. A lot of people that I personally follow on YouTube have read this year and have really liked it, and I've heard that it's like a good starter book for someone who's coming into fantasy for the first time, which obviously, like, I read a whole lot of adult high fantasy, so like it's not my first time, but I do like reading easier books occasionally, so I'm excited to see what this is about. It does seem like it's sort of a military fantasy just from the cover, so I'm definitely excited for that. I like a good military fantasy. So that's all I have for you guys. If you've read any of these books, let me know down in the comments because I would love to discuss with you guys. I post videos on Mondays, Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, so consider subscribing. And if you'd like to be notified as soon as I upload, you can click that little bell icon. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up to support my channel. All social media links are in the description down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.